Thanks, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner McElleen, and it's nice to see you again. When we met in my office about a year ago, I said, "Hey, blank slate, blank check. What do you need?" And you gave me a list of things that were priorities, and they were focused on technology and personnel. They did not include a wall, I might tell you. The number one item on your wish list, more drive-through inspection systems, something I didn't know much about and have since learned, the so-called Z portal system that basically scans or x-rays vehicles and containers that are coming across the border so you can detect whether there's anything suspicious included. I heard your message, and I thought it was a good one, because I am for border security, as I believe most members of Congress are. For 4 months, I worked with my colleagues on a bipartisan immigration agreement. We specifically included your top priorities, the ones you identified to me. We increased funding for Z portal scanning devices. We increased hiring and retention incentives for your personnel. We put port of entry infrastructure and personnel as a priority. We had funding for biometric entry and exit screening and many other things that we believed that your professionals agreed with you are part of keeping our border safe. On February 15th of this year, a bipartisan majority of the Senate supported our agreement, but it didn't reach 60 votes because the president opposed it. On the same day, a bipartisan supermajority of the Senate rejected the president's own immigration plan. This fall, the president tried to rally his base before the election, just a few days, over a caravan of immigrants headed to our border. But the reality is this caravan started on the president's watch. His administration is not addressing the root causes that have created this migrant movement toward the United States. Instead, the administration has cut security and humanitarian assistance by more than 1/3 to Central America. He has terminated the temporary protected status for El Salvadorans and Hondurans, which would force more than 250,000 of people from the United States back to these countries. And he shut down, in many respects, the legal avenues for migration, like the Central American Minor Program, where minors in these 3 countries that are sending so many people to our border could have applied for asylum in their countries without making this dangerous journey to our border. This administration eliminated that program, which gave these minors and their parents few options, and one, sadly, was to trek to our border and to face what they're facing today. The history of this issue is clear. A bipartisan group put together a measure and brought it to the Senate floor a few years ago that would have provided $40 billion in border security. That funding had the support of a bipartisan majority in the Senate, but it was never taken up or considered by the Republican House. So we want border security, but we want smart border security that serves our nation's needs. Democrats support it, and we stand ready to work on a bipartisan immigration reform legislation, but we're not going to support the administration's hardline agenda, which would slash legal immigration and family reunification, and unfortunately dramatically cut protections for women and children fleeing persecution. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, there was a news story a few months ago which was very troubling. And it said that for the first time in almost a century, life expectancy in the United States, life expectancy is going down. And the reason, of course, is the drug epidemic, a drug epidemic which is taking tens of thousands of lives all across the United States, in the cities and small towns, rural areas. And of course, we know that one of the drivers in this deadly drug epidemic is fentanyl. Fentanyl is its analogs were the cause of 2/3 of the more than 42,000 opioid deaths in the United States in 2016. The source of most illicit fentanyl, Mr. Commissioner, and the underlying chemical precursors is from China via international mail, which of course is part of your responsibility in monitoring that mail. Fentanyl is also being shipped from China to Mexico, to a lesser degree Canada, before being trafficked across the U.S. border, primarily through illegal ports of entry. I know the President wants to focus on the families coming from 3 countries in Central America, and they should be focused on. These are human beings who should be treated in a humane fashion. But I want to ask you this. Why are we focusing on building a $5 billion wall when your resources and technology, by your own admission, is not up to the task of stopping the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Let me give you a couple things to point to. The Z portal technology, which you told me for the first time, explained it to me and how good it was and how important it was. At this current moment, the so-called non-intrusive inspection systems are used to examine 98% of rail cars, but only 18% of arrival cargo, passenger vehicles, and sea containers combined. Yet the president's budget only asked for $44 million for these systems in the next year. So let me say, can you focus instead of on these families for a moment, focus on fentanyl. And tell me why this administration and why you aren't asking for more technology to stop the flow of deadly fentanyl into the United States, which has gone so far as to lower the life expectancy of Americans.
We're extremely concerned, Senator, about hard narcotics, fentanyl, methamphetamine. One of the front lines, as you note, for this substance to enter our country is right there at your mail facility at O'Hare in your state.
I've been there.
You've been there, I know, thank you. We, with the Interdict Act, with the STOP Act, we appreciate very much the support of Congress on this mission. We've had additional investments in our ability to detect fentanyl and our ability to test for it. We have asked for additional non-intrusive inspection technology.
$44 million. This president's asking for $5 billion for a wall which a ladder or a tunnel can overcome. And yet we have deadly fentanyl coming in for the worst drug epidemic in our history. Where is the passion for this? I think that'd be something to be the first request of your agency when it comes to protecting America.
I can promise you the passion and commitment here and with my men and women in the field is absolute for our counter-narcotics mission.
But the budget request doesn't reflect that passion whatsoever. It's all about the wall.
Senator, we did provide technical assistance to the appropriations committees in the House and the Senate on increasing the amount of non-intrusive inspection to include the drive-through systems that we talked about. That's going to help us increase our ability, if we're able to get that into the appropriations bill.
What about the Z portals? 18% of the vehicles coming into the United States,
right,
aside from rail cars, 18% are being scanned. Is that the best we can do?
No, I agree with you. We need to dramatically increase the percentage.
And how much money does it take for the scanning so that we can find contraband, narcotics, weapons, other things coming in? What do you need? How much money?
Well, we've provided that technical assistance to the appropriators. It's multi-year investment in the $300+ million range to achieve that.
300 million?
300 million a year for several years to get to that level.
That's a heck of a lot less than $5 billion.
Well, sir, the wall is also very important because we've got increased hard narcotics coming between ports of entry. 25% increase last year.
And you want walls, a concrete wall? Is that what you're looking for?
Not concrete. We're looking for a steel bollard wall with a modern wall system with cameras, sensors, and access roads.
Right, technology. Well, of course, we're on board for most of that, and we want to talk about expanding it. But I wish you were just as passionate about fentanyl as you are about these families. That's all they talk about, these families that show up at the border. The fentanyl is killing Americans.
I agree.
Innocent Americans every day addicted are dying because of this fentanyl, and it's your agency's responsibility. You have to put resources into this, and we need requests from you that focus on that as well. Let me say a word about the so-called asylum gap, where you said 80% know how to say the right words, credible fear, and so forth, and yet only 10 to 20% of them end up being in a position where they qualify for asylum status. Would you concede, in another question you were asked by Senator Cornyn, well, how do they happen to be at 80% levels of saying the right words? And you said because of smugglers and migrants' awareness of what the legal system is. I think you left out an element there. Aren't we also dealing with 3 countries in Central America that are virtually in shambles when it comes to law enforcement, or some of the most dangerous places in our hemisphere?
So all 3 countries have significant challenges with security, but all have improved dramatically over the last 2 years. The murder rates have gone down significantly in Honduras and El Salvador. That violence does not explain the current flows alone.
Well, it's interesting that the flows from those countries, those smaller countries, are greater than Mexico at this point. And I don't think that's coincidental. Let me read you a quote here, which you said last year. The U.S. needs to invest in Central American governance efforts and their economic development and their security against gangs, smugglers, drug cartels, and so forth to help prevent the push factor which exist in those countries and to help support their economic development. Do you still believe that?
I do. I said it in my opening as well.
So you believe that the administration's cutback in resources for these countries is making the situation worse instead of better?
Actually, seeing our men and women down there, the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Agency of International Development, apply the funds to good effect in key areas of these three countries, I'm very inspired by the difference we can make with this aid.
Inspiring but underpaid.
Senator Feinstein, could I just have 1 second to talk about our mail facility investments? I didn't get a chance to answer the senator's question. We have increased staffing at the mail facilities 20%. We have trained all our canines in detection of fentanyl. We have, working with the U.S. Postal Service, increased advanced electronic data on shipments from China to well over 65% now from less than 10% the year before. We've increased our seizures of fentanyl in the mail facilities based on that targeting data over 150% last year, and we're going to continue to stay passionate and focused on that mission.